The Ozark Mountains in 1884 were a place of shadow and mist, where the wind seemed to carry voices from unseen corners. The locals of the surrounding towns spoke in hushed tones of the Holloways, a family so secluded that even the bravest hunters avoided their lands. Tales of deformities, unnatural behaviors, and strange rituals circulated like wildfire. Children dared each other to approach the forest's edge but never crossed it. Samuel Clarke, a young preacher from a nearby town, had grown up hearing these stories. He was a man of faith, curious yet compassionate, drawn not to horror but to understanding. If they are suffering, he thought, they deserve help, not scorn. Armed with a journal, a worn prayer book, and a small lantern, he set off on the narrow, winding trails into the dense forest. The air grew thick, heavy with pine and decay, and the mountains loomed like silent sentinels. The mist curled around the trees, blurring shapes into grotesque forms. Samuel's heart pounded, not just from fear of what lay ahead, but from anticipation. Something in his chest told him that whatever he would find would test him beyond preaching sermons and comforting parishioners. As he trudged upward, the whispers of the forest seemed to call his name. Shadows moved at the edges of his vision. Every snapping twig felt like a warning. Yet he pressed on, stepping over roots and rocks, feeling the weight of history and isolation pressing down on him. Finally, through the fog, he glimpsed a faint shape, a cabin, dark and sagging, like it had grown from the soil itself. He paused. This was the Holloway's home, the epicenter of the fearsome tales. Taking a deep breath, he gripped his prayer book tighter and moved forward, unaware that the secrets he was about to uncover would change his understanding of humanity, suffering, and hope forever. The cabin's timbers groaned under the weight of years, leaning precariously on uneven ground. Windows were dark, opaque with grime, giving the structure the appearance of a hollow skull staring into the fog. Samuel's lantern flickered, casting trembling shadows against the walls as he approached. He knocked on the door, his knuckles rapping against the weathered wood, but no answer came, only the eerie echo of his own attempts. Summoning courage, Samuel pushed the door open. The smell hit him first, a thick, cloying mixture of unwashed bodies, rotting wood, and something unidentifiably sour. His stomach churned, yet he forced himself inside. 3 children sat on a threadbare rug, pale as the fog outside, eyes wide, unblinking, as though they had never seen an outsider before. Their mother emerged from the shadows, her hair tangled like dry straw and eyes hollowed by despair. She said nothing at first, merely watching, trembling. Samuel tried to offer a kind smile and spoke softly. "I am here to help, not harm." His voice cracked in the silence, a fragile bridge of hope reaching toward them. The children's gazes lingered on him, both curious and fearful. Samuel noticed small deformities, twisted fingers, uneven limbs. But he saw something else too, a flicker of intelligence, of life, untouched by despair. Despite the horror whispered about in town, there was humanity here, raw and fragile. He realized immediately that this family was both victim and prisoner. Their isolation had warped them, but it had also protected them in a strange way. Samuel knew he had entered a place where fear, sorrow, and love coexisted, tangled together. Whatever he found here, he would need patience, courage, and compassion to navigate the tangled web of tragedy the Holloways had lived for decades. Through quiet, halting words, the mother finally spoke. Her name was Eliza Holloway, and her voice was a ghost of sound, barely audible. She revealed the family secret. Generations of intermarriage had twisted their lives. Physical deformities, mental instability, and sickness were passed down like heirlooms. "We are cursed," she whispered, tears carving lines through the grime on her cheeks. Samuel listened intently, his heart torn between revulsion and deep pity. This was no folklore or legend. It was a family trapped by circumstance and ignorance. The children, though malformed, were sentient, aware, capable of thought and feeling. Each had moments of clarity, flashes of brilliance in an otherwise shadowed life. The eldest boy, Isaac, barely 12, seemed older in eyes and mind. He stared at Samuel with wary intensity. "God won't save us," he said, his voice trembling yet defiant. Samuel's chest tightened. Here was a child who had known death, isolation, and fear more intimately than most adults. He realized faith alone would not suffice. Trust, patience, and human connection were as vital as prayer. Eliza explained how the mountains protected them from society's cruelty, but also imprisoned them. People feared them, calling them monsters. Yet Samuel could see the small acts of love: a mother comforting a frightened child, a brother reading aloud, a sister helping another learn to walk. These were not monsters. They were humans who had endured horrors most could not imagine. The preacher felt a quiet determination stir within him. He would not turn away. He would face the macabre, confront the whispers of horror, and offer hope to those who had known nothing but fear. The Holloway's suffering was profound, but perhaps, he thought, salvation was still possible. Samuel's eyes were drawn to a narrow staircase, partially hidden by a tattered curtain. A strange compulsion pushed him upward. The attic was cramped, dusty, and filled with relics of generations: journals, faded letters, crude sketches. Each item told a story of hardship and human fragility. He sifted through the journals carefully, discovering accounts of generations trapped in cycles of intermarriage. Deaths, deformities, and sorrow were meticulously chronicled. Yet alongside the despair were small, tender glimpses of humanity: a mother writing of a child's laughter, a father sketching the mountain's beauty, fleeting joys that survived even the bleakest moments. Samuel felt a profound understanding form. The Holloways were not merely grotesque. They were survivors, trapped in a cage built by tradition, fear, and ignorance. Their isolation had protected them, but also reinforced the very curses that plagued them. From below came the soft sobs of a child. Samuel descended, placing a gentle hand on Isaac's shoulder. The boy shivered but allowed the contact. In that moment, Samuel realized the depth of the family's trust, fragile but real. Trust would be the key to their salvation, and he would need it as much as they did. Samuel focused on Isaac, the eldest. Despite deformities, the boy's mind was sharp, curious, and empathetic. Isaac confessed he loved the journals, dreaming of life beyond the mountains. Yet he had witnessed family members die, helpless against sickness and poverty, trapped in an endless cycle. "I'm the last," Isaac whispered. His small voice carried the weight of generations lost. Samuel felt an ache he could not ignore. Here was a child, brilliant and compassionate, yet imprisoned by circumstances beyond his control. For the first time, Samuel truly understood the stakes. The Holloways were not merely a curiosity. They were a lesson in resilience, suffering, and the enduring human spirit. To help them, he would need more than faith. He would need courage, empathy, and ingenuity. As they sat together, the wind howled outside. Samuel promised Isaac that he would find a way to bring them hope, even if the world had long since abandoned them. Night fell, bringing an oppressive darkness into the cabin. Groans and whispers echoed from the walls, and shadows seemed to move independently, forming shapes too grotesque to name. Samuel stayed awake, listening, trying to separate fear from reality. Suddenly, a scream pierced the night. One of the younger children had fallen from the loft. Samuel rushed to the child, who was unharmed but terrified. The incident underscored the fragility of their lives and the constant tension in the cabin. Even the smallest misstep could result in disaster. The Holloways clung to each other, eyes wide, trembling. Samuel realized fear was their constant companion, and patience would be his most essential tool. Healing could not happen overnight. It required time, safety, and trust. By morning, the cabin seemed less oppressive. Samuel helped fetch water, tended to small injuries, and listened to stories of the family's past. For the first time in decades, laughter and warmth flickered in the Holloway home. Eliza smiled faintly. Isaac played his wooden flute, and the haunting melody filled the cabin. Samuel realized they were not merely victims. They had created beauty even in isolation. He silently vowed to nurture that spark of hope. Saving them would not be about removing them from the mountains alone. It would be about rekindling the humanity they had nearly lost. The distant clatter of hooves echoed through the mountains. Samuel's heart tightened. A stranger appeared. Tobias, a hunter with sharp eyes and calculating movements. He claimed to seek game, but Samuel sensed darker motives. Tobias's fascination with the Holloways chilled Samuel. He seemed intrigued not by their humanity, but by their deformities. Samuel realized that the real danger to the family was not the mountains. It was the curiosity and cruelty of outsiders. Tobias demanded to see the children. Samuel stepped forward. "They are not curiosities. They are human beings," he said firmly. The Holloways watched, tense and fearful. In that moment, the children witnessed courage, standing up against cruelty and injustice. Samuel realized moral courage could be more powerful than physical strength. Protecting the vulnerable was often the greatest act of bravery. Samuel understood that the Holloways could not remain in the cabin forever. He devised a plan to move them to a distant relative in a town hundreds of miles away. It was dangerous. Tobias prowled nearby, and the forest itself was unforgiving. The family hesitated, fear and hope intertwined in their eyes, yet they trusted Samuel. For the first time, they glimpsed the possibility of a life beyond the mountains, where love and opportunity awaited. Samuel knew the first step toward salvation was belief. Belief that someone cared enough to act. The journey down the mountains was more perilous than Samuel had anticipated. The narrow paths twisted like serpents, slick with mud and frost. Snow began to fall, turning the forest into a ghostly labyrinth. Each step was treacherous. One misstep could send them tumbling down jagged cliffs. Samuel carried the youngest children, while Isaac helped guide the others, his small but determined hands steadying their balance. Despite the danger, a fragile camaraderie began to form. The children whispered stories of the mountains, of the trees and streams they had known since birth. Samuel listened, realizing that their world, though horrifying in isolation, had its own rhythm, its own beauty. He encouraged them to share memories, to find light even in shadows. The forest tested them relentlessly. A sudden crack of ice beneath their feet sent hearts racing. Samuel's lantern swung wildly, illuminating the snow-draped trees like phantoms. For a moment, fear threatened to overwhelm him, but he steadied himself, drawing strength from the children's fragile trust. Each successful step built courage, each small victory a testament to their resilience. By nightfall, they found shelter beneath a dense stand of evergreens. The snow muffled the world around them, and for a moment, they rested in silence. Samuel reflected on the journey. Survival was more than endurance. It was hope, trust, and unwavering commitment. He knew the Holloways were beginning to see a world beyond fear, and he silently vowed to carry them safely to it. Night fell, and the group camped beneath a hollowed oak. The children huddled together, shivering, their faces pale under the cold moonlight. Hunger gnawed at them, and exhaustion weighed heavily on Samuel's shoulders. He knelt in the snow to pray, asking for guidance, safety, and courage. Isaac's small voice interrupted him. "Does God care for us?" he asked, eyes wide with genuine doubt. Samuel paused. He had no easy answer. Instead, he smiled gently. "God sees the lost, the forgotten," he said, "and sometimes he works through others." The boy's expression softened. Samuel realized faith wasn't just about miracles. It was about trust, compassion, and the courage to act when hope seems impossible. That night, the Holloways slept closer to him than ever before, leaning on his presence as a shield against the mountain's cruelty. Samuel understood that his role was no longer merely spiritual. He was a guardian, a beacon in their darkest hours. The calm was shattered the next morning. Tobias appeared on the trail, eyes sharp, demeanor menacing. "You cannot take them," he growled, his voice cold and authoritative. Samuel stepped between him and the family, heart hammering but voice steady. "They are not possessions," he said firmly. "They are human beings." The Holloways watched from behind him, tense and fearful. Tobias lunged, but Samuel's words struck deeper than any blow. "Leave them alone, or you will be judged by more than law." Isaac raised his flute. A soft, haunting melody rose into the crisp air. The notes, innocent yet defiant, seemed to shake Tobias. The beauty of the music, coupled with Samuel's moral courage, unsettled the hunter. For the first time, the Holloways felt power, not physical, but spiritual. Tobias, unnerved, finally backed away, disappearing into the trees. The family exhaled collectively, their first taste of relief in years. Their path led to a swollen river, ice-choked and roaring. Samuel's heart sank. There was no bridge, only the dangerous current. He carried the youngest children on his back, while Isaac guided the older ones, helping them balance on slippery rocks. The river tested them brutally. Every step demanded trust, coordination, and courage. Samuel encouraged them with soft words, reminding them of their strength and resilience. When they finally reached the opposite bank, drenched and trembling, relief washed over them like sunlight breaking through clouds. For the first time, the Holloways truly realized they could survive outside the mountains. The river, which had seemed like a deadly obstacle, had become a symbol of their endurance, of the possibility that life could extend beyond fear and isolation. Weeks later, the small town of Linden welcomed them cautiously. The Holloways' appearance startled townsfolk, whispers circulating like wildfire. Samuel introduced them gently, explaining their story with honesty and compassion. The town responded with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Slowly, neighbors offered food, clothing, and shelter. Isaac began learning to read formally, while the younger children explored schools and playgrounds for the first time. They encountered prejudice but also kindness, discovering that the world could offer hope as well as challenge. For Samuel, it was a revelation. Humanity could embrace, nurture, and protect, but only if fear was tempered with understanding. The Holloways were not anomalies. They were people deserving of dignity, opportunity, and love. In Linden, the Holloways began to heal. Laughter returned in small doses, mingling with tears as memories of the mountains resurfaced. Samuel helped them confront the trauma of decades, teaching them to see themselves as more than victims of fate. Eliza discovered purpose in teaching the children basic skills and kindness. Isaac composed haunting melodies on his flute, turning sorrow into art. The younger children laughed, played, and learned, discovering their potential beyond isolation. For Samuel, the transformation was profound. He realized that true healing required not just survival, but the rediscovery of dignity, creativity, and hope. The Holloways were reclaiming their humanity, one fragile step at a time. Samuel reflected on the journey. The Holloways had taught him that compassion could rewrite destinies. Fear often distorts judgment, cruelty thrives on ignorance, and hope can flourish even in darkness. Isaac's music, once a private solace, became a bridge between the family and the town. The children's laughter drew curiosity and admiration. Samuel understood that acts of kindness, however small, could break the cycles of suffering that spanned generations. True courage, he realized, lay in love and protection of the vulnerable. Years later, Samuel prepared to leave Linden, confident that the Holloways were thriving. Isaac hugged him tightly. "You saved us," he whispered. Samuel shook his head, smiling. "You saved yourselves," he said, "through courage, hope, and love. I only helped you see it." The mountains remained in memory, But the Holloways were no longer trapped by fear or deformity. Their legacy had shifted from horror to resilience, from isolation to community. Back in his village, Samuel chronicled the Holloways' story, not to frighten, but to inspire. People would read of their deformities, isolation, and suffering, but also of resilience, trust, and compassion. He realized the deepest truths often hide within the darkest tales. The Holloways were living proof that humanity could endure, survive, and even thrive, even when all seemed lost. Samuel's journal became a testament to courage, empathy, and the transformative power of love. Decades passed. Isaac grew into a man, his music enchanting townsfolk far and wide. The younger children flourished, creating art, learning, and forming families of their own. The mountains faded in memory, replaced by community, opportunity, and love. The Holloway's journey had been macabre, terrifying, and tragic, but it had also been beautiful. Fear had been confronted, isolation broken, and humanity rediscovered. Samuel's teachings lived on, that courage, compassion, and hope could transform even the darkest circumstances. Sometimes the most disturbing stories hide the deepest truths and the greatest hope.